We've all heard the saying, love is blind. It was written by Shakespeare quite some time ago, and we've all heard it said time and time again. But how many of us have truly understood and digested it? There was a man by the name of Friedrich Nietzsche, and 100 years before my birth, he studied this line in depth. He spent several weeks poring over it, and he came to one fundamental idea. Yes, love is blind, but friendship closes its eyes. To me, that is a far better message. I mean, saying love is blind is saying I'm being fooled. But saying my friends choose to close their eyes means they are with me in spite of my faults. He hunted for a deeper meaning and he found it. How many of you have taken a lesson, even a cliche like that, and studied it in depth? I know I haven't, and I wish I had. Now, I spoke to you before about my father and how he taught me that there are lessons to be learned, go out there and learn them. But he was only one muse in my life. I have another. And he taught me what my father didn't do. He taught me that when you come to a lesson, you may be told the answer, but there are more answers when you choose to go further. When you say, yes, that's right, but why is that the case? And in fact, Madam Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, and welcome guests, that's what I'm going to try and convey to you now. Now, this second muse in my life, he wasn't some great philosopher, although maybe one day he will be. Alcohol kind of clouds that at the moment, but he's my cousin. And he's marginally older than me, some 9 months. And when we were younger, he academically outshone me. At GCSEs, he got 12 A stars and 3 A's, while he also did 2 A levels. And it was astounding. But even today, he says that the least of his learning was done in the classroom. What the teachers told him, they were lessons, but you didn't learn. It was Thomas Merton who said that what we call, no, sorry, not Thomas Merton, Plato. Sorry. He said that what we call learning isn't learning, it's memorizing. All we do is we repeat what we are told, but we don't search for more. We don't sit down, we haven't learned. Love is blind, you don't learn until you've been in a relationship where you have been blinded. And that's an important lesson, I think. Because so often, these cliches, they get thrown around. And as they progress, and I might teach you something, and you might teach someone else, it loses meaning. I've seen other people fall foul of love is blind. I can't say I've learned that. I was quite fortunate, actually. I fell in love at a young age, I got married. But it's a risk we all run. We get told lessons. Do we absorb them? Do we hunt them out? Or do we just ignore them and say, yes, I've heard that 100 times before? You see, there's so many things that we could learn in life if we look deeper into them. I'm going to come back to another quote here. This time, it's yet again from my good friend, Nietzsche. And a lot of people, they look at his lessons and they look at the publicity. Unfortunately, it was some of his lessons that were misinterpreted by Hitler. That's a strange name to drop into a speech, but they were misunderstood. Anyone can look at Nietzsche's books and tell you that that wasn't the message. Nietzsche spoke of man and Superman, but he said all are equal. Man becomes super by helping others and by doing more. And that's a fundamental lesson. Now, Hitler, when he read through this book, he saw the overriding top message. He just said, yes, there are men and there are lesser men. That was not what he was going for. And that, just hearing that from my cousin, and as he spoke at length about it, he's now studying a philosophy PhD, incidentally. Who would have thought? And is quite heavily fueled by alcohol. Some of it, I'm fairly certain, is illegal. But he says that's his muse. He said, all things are open to interpretation. and the truth of them isn't a function of what is true, but of what is most powerful at the moment. We've all heard history is written by the victors, and unfortunately the victors are the ones who pass us the information. And that got me thinking. Even before that, I kept on reading into it, and he encouraged me to. And we would have long debates, and I kept on trying to understand it. And it brought some very conflicted thoughts into my mind. And undoubtedly it probably will with all of you when you get to it, because I've reached a conclusion that history could very well be built on lies. Needless to say, I got very, very confused. And he handed me a book, and we had a lengthy discussion, and we had an argument, and as often ends up with discussions with him when we get too philosophical, it ended up with vodka. I had a very similar lesson to you on that day, in fact. And he said, you can learn more. Take this book and read it. At that point, he probably won the argument, that's because he has a higher tolerance for drinking, and so by the end of it, I was talking about fish. But I took the book away, and I read it, and I realised everything he'd said had pretty much come from this book. And I went back to him and I said, you tell me about learning and so on, but none of those ideas were yours, you took them from a book. He said, yes. But what I took from the book, anyone can take from a book. Now that you've read it, let's sit down and we'll talk about it in depth. We'll come up with new ideas. Learning is when you discover something for yourself. When you discover something new, when you break down new doors, when you learn something through personal realization. And on that day, I'd say I was greatly changed. I turned to so many things, and I tried to look everywhere. And one of my friends at the time, he was working for a financial agency, and he was doing tax returns for someone. In 3 days, he'd been in 4 continents. He'd flown first class every time. He was on a wage of £4 million a year. And he was trying to argue the case for getting £1,200 back in tax. That's a lesson which I've been pondering for some time. But I'd like you to maybe try and consider that. Consider what's right, what's the truth there? Was someone right, was someone wrong? We don't know why he needed that money back. There's so much we don't know unless we fully try to digest and consider and understand everything. We need to see the picture from every side, and doing that means studying ourselves. And that's something I now encourage everyone to do, and I'd like to encourage you all to do the same.
Again, can we take 1 minute, please, to write down your feedback for Armadi? I'd like to now move on to our 4th speaker, who is Anita. And Anita is speaking from her advanced manual, which Chris will tell you about a little later. I asked Anita who she'd like to give a medal to, and Anita would like to award a medal to her mother for unconditional love.